Okay, welcome, very good. We're going to have a continuation of the program that aired yesterday, and our guest is Howard Bloom, friend of the universe, friend of the intellectual community upon this planet Earth, and we were talking about the birth of the universe and seeing things in a very large pattern, very large issues around physics and science and so forth, and we're going to talk some now about that is also contained in his book, The God Problem, how a godless cosmos creates, which is a major, and I'm here to say it again at the outset, a major tour de force that should be read by one and all. His work continues, and one are encouraged to get to that, but we're also thinking about maybe we can get around to some more discussion of things in a comprehensive vein that includes, particularly once we get 200,000 years ago, to the Homo sapiens species, and even on to maybe some geopolitics or politics and that sort of thing. But Howard, welcome back so much
Thanks
to
a lot,
this
Harold.
second conditioning of the program. So we were talking about that and all the emerging properties, the nature of the universe, what a miracle it is that anything exists. I shared with you that I wake up every day wondering how the hell everything came to be, and it still is, and it is apparently sort of almost miraculous that it is, because when you realize so much of the 99.9% of every species that's ever existed has gone extinct. It could have been it could have been 100% under certain circumstances, and it still might be possibly. Or it might be a time of major transformation evolutionarily of the so-called human prospect or the human experience in universe as part of an evolutionary process. We're at a time of absolutely qualitative transformation at the moment you and I sit and talk, don't you think? Or what do you think about it?
We're always at a moment of qualitative transformation.
Okay, that's interesting.
And let me be more specific. The view of nature that has been given out by eco-romanticists is wrong. It's a view that says, in essence, we've raped nature and we've plundered the planet's resources and we're running out of resources that no creature in the history of creatures
that's a political thing.
has ever done this.
That's a one take on it.
Well, the tricky thing is that this is a very dangerous planet, and we managed to somehow green it. We managed to somehow take life and spread life all across its surfaces.
Well, it greened itself before we were even on the scene.
No, I mean we as living things.
Thank you. That's a larger context than humanity.
Once upon a time, 3.85 billion years ago, when the first teaspoon of life set forth upon this planet, it was a teaspoon of bacterial colonies, and it was up against severe challenges.
What year did you have?
3.85
that would
billion.
And if I understand, I don't know, set me straight, you know more than I'm sure on that, but there's a fellow, Robert Shapiro, here in New York, but anyway, that they're trying to get to where it was about 3.8, that the first constituents of what was to become ribonucleic acid leading DNA was about 3.8 billion years ago, that the organic process, the beginnings of the organic process began. That ended up with evolution that can then bring a whole lot of materialistic understanding.
If he has material on that, it would be interesting to see.
No, he doesn't have it.
Yeah.
They're doing it. There's the guy, there's the thing, a certain, did you see the thing? There's a certain elements of clay on Mars that contains something. There was a little thing.
It was about 5 years ago.
No, this was last week. I saw.
Really?
Yeah.
Ah, okay.
A little discovery. Well, they may have discovered it was made available to me. A few days ago. That there is a type of clay on Mars that has a thing that is needed in terms of their understanding how the first. Don't think ribonucleic.
Right.
It's too complicated. The constituents of what's to become ribonucleic.
Well,
so about 3.8 billion years ago, the organic process got started.
Well, the basic building blocks of life, the organic compounds, the simple organic compounds, the carbon-based compounds, those are formulated in dark clouds of interstellar gas, cold clouds of interstellar gas, hot clouds of interstellar gas, on spicules of ice in space. They're all over the place in space.
Are they? Okay, yeah.
And presumably they were all over the place on this planet too, since this planet was made of great gatherings of this dust. Of the kind that we see in interstellar clouds today.
Could you repeat it? I don't understand.
Okay.
The components of life, did you say? Or
yes, the simple components, the organic molecules, the carbon-based molecules. Simple ones. I mean, you and I are made up of megamolecules, humongous molecules. Molecules, we're made up of molecules with millions of atoms a molecule.
And does this thing relate to 3.8 billion years or no?
Well, the 3.85 billion years is a figure from a guy named Schopf, who found, he found the remains of the oxidization that would have been produced by bacteria in rocks that were 3.85 billion years old.
Oh.
So one way
is that where it comes from? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
One way or the other.
Well, this fellow Shapiro is over at NYU.
Yeah.
He agrees with that, and they have the conferences where they try to deal with the people who are trying to understand the beginning.
Well, his work sounds interesting. I'm not familiar with it.
He's getting on now, but he's a beautiful guy.
Yeah.
He's still with us and still putting it out.
One way or the other, approximately less than 700 million years after this planet began, which means
4.5
new in the life of this planet. Well, it was
the planet's about 3.5.
The planet is 4.5 billion years old.
Yeah, 4.5.
And at the 3.85 billion year mark, relatively new on this planet. This planet was still being smacked by planetesimals.
Absolutely.
Smacked like a pudding smacked with a spoon.
Yeah, they got hit by a thing that created the moon that almost did it in.
Yeah.
It really did.
It was just replete with poisons.
And if that hadn't happened, it wouldn't have all happened.
Yeah.
I mean, these things, it's like billiard balls. If this hadn't hit this, it's like, how in the hell did it all come to be?
And that's another question.
Yeah,
but the point is that life was up against a really serious challenge. How in the world do you survive on a planet of poisons? How do you survive on a planet with things like phosphorus and sulfur? And well, there was no free oxygen, thank God, but that's a serious poison. Water is a big problem. Water is the ultimate solvent. The extremes of temperature were extraordinary. Some life we know now came together around sea vents that have a temperature of over 200 degrees. That's hot. That's an extreme.
Those are, and they got life forms down there that are not even photosynthesis. Now, I mean, now, because we get around to some geopolitics about Trident submarines and the destructive capability of extended human consciousness.
But the main point is that if you and I were part of the life forms then, and if we'd been parents of youngsters, we would have said to them, "This is the wrong planet, kids.
Go back to where you came
there's
from.
no way that you're going to survive on this planet."
Yeah, but it was surviving in that, and then that changed, and the thing came, there were emerging properties, the whole evolutionary process, but it was just it was like a touch and go thing all the way. It
was touch and go, and we
managed.
And
then all the variety that comes.
But here's the big trick. The big trick was to take poisons, seize them, and make them parts of the machinery of life.
Of life in an advanced form from where you were at the time that they were made.
Exactly.
That's
so that
emerging properties in cyber talk.
So everything that had looked like a poison to your parents, to you, was a precious treasure.
Or your great-great-great-great-grandparents or something, or thinking ahead generations.
Well, think of sulfur. Sulfur is
eons.
Sulfur's really dangerous stuff. What did life learn to do with sulfur? It learned to make it part of its metabolism. Part of its basic machinery for pulling energy and matter together in life forms. It did the same thing with phosphorus. It learned how to take phosphorus and make it an energy exchanger. Make it something that hustled parcels of energy along within the cell. It took and these things were poisons.
I know. And that's got a thing, you got to take into the time factor that it would be going eons. Or something, and then the conditions changed, and what was deadly became the life stuff of a new way of an environmental context in which something new was emerging.
What was deadly became a delight because it was reinvented as a delight. And so life has been...
And the context had changed.
So life has been reinventing not just resources, it's been reinventing poisons at every stage of the game. And right now, for every ounce of life stuff on this planet, there are 220 million ounces of stuff that isn't part of the life process right now. 220 million ounces
that's
for every ounce of life stuff, this much.
There
are 220 million ounces, more than I can demonstrate. This building might weigh that. life
Rocks
stuff
and
that
things.
that aren't being used as life stuff.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And if we
they all had to be formed too.
They all had to be formed, but these things are all potential resources in the same way that phosphorus and sulfur, two deadly poisons, turned out to be two potential resources.
Yeah, right.
And if we don't understand that these are potential resources, aside from building material, which we use them for, then let's look at bacteria, who are the other great researchers and developers and survivors, and are our ancestors.
I think about 100 trillion cells in a human organism, the vast majority of our bacteria in the gut.
Exactly.
I mean, you know, bacteria, we walk in a sea of bacteria.
Yeah, and we are a sea of bacteria because they take a lot of the food that we cannot digest but think we can, and they digest it for us. They build vitamin P, vitamin K, vitamin B for us, and they turn other forms of food that we think we're eating, we're just chewing. We're just going to the grocery store, finding the food, and chewing it.
We're beginning to get to some human prospects that maybe we should try and do. We're talking in scientific terms, evolution, and all these kind of things and everything. But maybe we can begin to get around to, okay, we got the evolutionary process. Once you get to the evolutionary process, it begins to be able to have a context of understanding everything without the creation myths that have been. One presumes that when we finally get to, more or less just a couple figures, 3.8 evolution got organic evolution got started, and it went through, and then we went through eons and eons and eons of times with worms making things and all that, and then we finally get down to the species of which we're a part, which we're mostly interested in, I suppose, but it came through all of this. 99.9% of all the species went extinct, and then there was a process by which they would go extinct, and then some of them last for a very long period of time, and we're coming to understand that, and we're coming to understand the evolutionary process by which the new appears, and we want to get to that conference that I went to now, where they're talking about transhumanism. Well, let's talk about humanism for a while, so we can get to transhumanism. But we had about 200,000 years. I guess we more or less, that's the figure right around that time, that our species appeared out of, I guess, Homo habilis, no?
There are so many new creatures, so many new homos coming along that the picture has gotten very confusing. And you know, there's the creatures that were found in Georgia.
I don't know.
Dmanisi, I think it's called.
Yeah, I don't know.
There are more than I can point a stick at and remember the names of at this point.
What new?
Well, in Dmanisi, Georgia, approximately 5 years ago, we found a whole new form of proto-human.
Proto-human.
Yeah.
Okay. Well.
Right.
Okay. Yeah.
Sort of on a par with Neanderthal and other pre-human.
Well, Neanderthal. Did you see the thing Walpole out of Michigan? You know, he thinks that they're in the gene pool. Well, and they had a thing on Nova the other day thinking that. But that's a detail.
Right. Okay.
With all due respect, it's a detail, and you're always going to get people arguing about the semicolon placement or the detail of something. Right. But in general, our species appeared in Africa 200,000 years ago.
Something like that.
Yeah, and that there are going to be, and always, like we showed that little film yesterday, where they went through all kinds of things, and what you're looking for are markers. Right. And what you're looking for that as markers that the thing that's backing up, the scientific backing up, is maybe, you could have arguments about whether it was 220 or 230 or something like that.
Well, the first stone tools.
And mankind is all caught up in financing things where they can argue back and forth about details, but it's the patterns we want to get to, no?
2.5 million years ago, our ancestors started manufacturing stone tools.
Okay.
And that's the first really big marker for
what,
2.5 million years ago.
That would be Australopithecine, I should think.
Or Lucy. Something like that.
Homo habilis about 1.5 million, I think.
But one way or the other, it was them. It was us. It was the beginning of us.
No, we were not there. Well, we were not. We were contained in it in a gestating form. Right. But Homo sapien did not exist.
Homo sapiens sapien is 100,000 years. And now I've seen somebody pushing that figure to 80,000 years. So 200,000 to 80,000 years is the right range.
200,000. Well, that would be for our species.
But 250,000 years ago,
I don't know. You found this proto-human is not the same as a human thing, and Homo habilis. Well, okay, it's a detail.
Right.
It's a detail that's hardly worth working over.
Right.
Because what you need is that the Homo sapiens species came, and am I thinking I may be out of date because you live another day and your facts all get screwed up. But anyway, you go. But 200. So we Homo sapien. We're more interested in that because we're human beings, right? And we have this ability to do we? I've heard you talk on other programs you and I have done about just think of the effect of the earthworm in terms of creating soil and everything has an effect, or bumblebee or bees, and there is an effect. But we have a unique thing in two orders, it seems to me. One is that we have a self-reflective consciousness that can ask the big questions abstractly. Right. I don't know if I got a good dog who you've met. You know well. I don't think
but
he
doesn't
thinks
seem
about,
to ask those kinds of questions.
Well, maybe, but I don't think so. But he's more interested in like a bone or something. But anyway, and then the other one is that we seem to have a unique capability to extend our consciousness or our power through tools and technology and make the world other than, in an Eden-like sense, is the way the creatures embedded in nature as we were through much of our tenure on Earth, embedded and in touch with nature directly. And we can make it differently. We then call that culture and so forth.
No, we have remarkable capabilities of that kind.
Yeah, and they're coming to a point of having extreme. All the resources were there when mankind first appeared in Africa. All the oil, all the soil, all the everything essentially was there. But it had a liaison with the mankind being able to apply his ability to utilize it in a new kind of way. And in a if we start talking about social patterns and political patterns and so forth.
And technological patterns.
And technological. That's an extension of consciousness.
And if humans were not able to hold on to their knowledge and pass it down to the next generation, then none of this business, harnessing oil, having internal combustion engines, using coal, or any of the rest of it would have existed. Because if we were not, dogs are not able to talk to each other. They do communicate a lot to each other.
He communicates a lot to me. And we got two cats. Have you seen the cat? Our cats, boy, they are so laid back. I mean, they're really something else.
But there's a big difference between this immediate emotional communication that you get from your dog or your cat and being able to formulate a concept and then being able to pass it on to your children.
Well, that's a way of being, that's right. That's
and we humans are obsessed with our ancestors. We are often trying to cite the right source for something. If we can refer to an Einstein, if we can refer to a Krishnamurti, if we can refer to a Buckminster Fuller, it helps us in our conversation.
Well,
and we're constantly looking for those references, a Thomas Jefferson, to a Bible, to the Bible.
For any sort of biological, or you could say political legitimacy claim. The claim to legitimacy has been the means by which certain organization of people have been very vested in terms of having control over the people that they are ruling over.
Well, this deep need of ours to insert our ancestors into our conversation is what keeps our ancestors alive in modern culture.
The deep need to understand the human authorities.
We are constantly citing authorities. We're constantly saying, well, Einstein said this. The Bible said that.
I keep inciting bloom. The bloom is on the rose is on the bloom.
Well, that's very kind. But nonetheless, this means we're carrying our ancestors around in a knapsack. And
well, in a sense, we are we not?
Yes.
I mean, we're just moving ahead in a time frame.
Now, your dog is able to do that, but he's only able to do that with his genes. His genes sum up the experience of his ancestors.
Well, it does with us too, I guess.
And our genes
like
sum
we were
it up
talking about Gaia.
But we have this grandfather fetish. We have this fetish for looking back at authorities.
Think so? Well,
yes, and you'll find it not just in the West. You'll find it in China, where it's an intense part of the culture. It has been a part of the culture for a long time.
Ancestor worship, even.
You'll find it in Africa and pre-literate societies. You will find it.
You don't think we have it in antelope or something?
No, antelope don't have it the way that we do.
Well, what does that tell us?
It tells us that we are managing. We have built a carapace for ourselves.
A what?
A carapace. We have built this big shell around ourselves.
Carapace, a shell? Okay.
That has gotten bigger and bigger and bigger as time has progressed.
Technology.
Because each layer, technology, it's a layer of technology, symbolic expression, language, the arts, the sciences, all of this adds layer after layer of experience to this pile we carry around within us, and this deep need we have to cite our authorities, to cite our references, to cite the ancestors.
Well, why isn't that just a deep need to be educated to what is the historical pattern?
That's where education comes from.
Why does it have to be seen as a... I'm sorry, I don't quite understand. That's just intellectual curiosity.
Yes, but your dog doesn't have it. This is what...
okay, right.
And I mean,
it's important to our sense of identity.
And more.
Yeah, more.
You and I benefit every day from this radical innovation that was made by, as you pointed out, humans who were proto-humans and not at anywhere near human yet, 2.5 million years ago, of deciding to pick up rocks and deliberately fashion them into specific tools for use by their hands to extend the power of their hands. And they in turn
came out of people who were even more, if the term could be used, primitive in an evolutionary sense, because there's a new coming.
But there was a big difference between the primitive ancestors before them and them.
Yeah, that's right.
They left us something.
They get a difference that is species, and they get a difference that is carrying that forth. And the bulk of the experiments and so forth have gone extinct.
Well, the
something
concept
keeps it going.
Yes,
I mean, and it's just it's touch and go all the way.
It's that ancestor itch inside of us.
Well, you've got that thing. I'm interested in understanding. I don't quite understand what's wrong with wanting to know about your.
There's nothing wrong.
No, not wrong. Okay.
It's what makes us human. It's part of what gives us the advantage of being able to sit in a studio like this today.
Yeah, and also to be able to think in what is called an intelligent, interesting, and curious manner.
And it makes us different from your dog. And it also makes us a kind of synergistic collaboration, unlike any the cosmos has ever seen. But guess what? Because the cosmos is not entropic, because things do not fall apart in the cosmos, things fall together in interesting new synergies in this cosmos.
Well,
something that breaks all the previous rules and does things that no other previous thing has ever done, the way human culture and human consciousness do, that's what the cosmos specializes in generating.
That is
things
true.
That are radically new.
That is as a pattern. That is true.
And that's why we have to
get rid
of...
And it's very rare.
And that's why we have to get rid of the concept of entropy, because it misleads our thinking, and it keeps us from seeing the fucking, if you'll excuse the word, sorry.
Wait a minute, everybody. I'm kidding.
It keeps us from seeing the absolutely astonishing material miracles going on in this universe. Not just at our level, but when the first atom emerges, when the first galaxy emerges, when the first stars emerge, when the first stars die and produce 88 new forms of atoms in their hearts. All these are giant leaps in which the cosmos coughs out something radically and astonishingly new. And we are stuck with the notion that in reality everything is falling apart and tending toward disorder.
Well, okay, that's back to the second law and all that kind of stuff. But radically new. I guess everything, what, alligators have lived for eons and eons because they have a... I've just been reading some more Eldridge, directed there by, what's his name?
Dawkins.
Dawkins' book, and everything. And it seems to be that it's very, they can go steady state or in stasis and everything. They go for millions and millions of years. They're just there. And they're...
Well, in our last show, you were talking about absolutes. And
was
yes, and you were denigrating absolutes.
You mean the last one that aired just yesterday?
The last show that aired just yesterday.
Oh, okay. I never know what the hell I'm saying.
Right. Well, in denigrating absolutes, you missed something. You normally don't miss anything. But in this case, without absolutes, change cannot happen. Without certain elements of stability, giant novelties cannot occur. For example, we've done this.
Okay, go ahead, spell it out. I don't quite understand.
If you try to poke your finger through your palm, let's try it. Does your finger go through?
Yeah, I don't need to know.
Okay, your finger won't go through, right?
No, of course not.
How old are you?
Wait,
just
no.
Let's just ask: are you younger than 100 years old?
Yes.
Okay, you think so. What about this stuff that's keeping your finger from going through? How old is that?
It's called protoplasm. 100 years, I guess, or less than 100 years old.
It's called protons, and those protons are 13.77 billion years old.
Yeah, gotcha.
They were born in the very first flick of the Big Bang that we saw in our little episode from the History Channel. So those are elements of stability, those protons. They've been stable for 13.77 billion years now.
So there's certain,
and without those protons, you couldn't have that constantly changing mind. I mean, you know that when you walk to the bus stop or when you walk to the subway stop, you will go through 100 changes of mood and 100 flicks of preoccupation. And yet, without the proton stability, you couldn't do that. So you need a balance between stability and change in order to get novelty that means something. And that radically redefines things.
I think I was just thinking, when I used that, I was probably thinking of something, like for instance, the name of your book is A Godless Cosmos. And the idea of an absolute is an overarching reality that subsumes everything else. And rules out the possibility of change because there's no reason to think that way. And it was in that order that I was
and if you ever stop change, you'd be stopping the universe.
Yeah, that's right.
And you can't do that.
And in that sense, about the protons, I don't know about that thing about that there is, I suppose, are you saying we have a dialectic or something? A dialectic holds?
That's a good word.
And that, male and female is good. There's east, west, there's and we need both.
Exactly.
Okay, now, do we have that able to be over into, or like in a religion, you don't need anything else if you read it with great, it subsumes everything else. If you've got an overarching reality, I don't care about your facts, I've got God.
And that's the way it seems to you. But in reality, your religion's not going to go anywhere unless you've got things like Norman Borlaug's Green Revolution, producing additional food to keep your religionists alive. In reality, so much as you may think that you're freezing things in place, the world is changing around you, and you are often benefiting from that change.
Well, it might be that we live in a world. And that might bring us around now also to where we can start thinking about things like there is this whole world that makes up the news and the reality and all of that, and things are going on. And we've got this evolutionary thing going back to the beginning and all that, but we got this species, and it's a unique species, it's got unique qualities, and it's reached a point, I would submit, I don't know for sure, but I would submit that the extension of that consciousness, and let's just say the political systems that followed the Neolithic. Once we got to the Neolithic with agriculture, we could start civilization, we could have empires developed. Most of the time, I don't think we knew very well what we were wandering in the wilderness and so forth. But we had that, and we had the 4 food complexes that made up security for and we had empires. And then what we've had is a political system where you had great numbers of people who had to be subsumed within a political order of authority. And we've had that set up, and we had pharaohs who would run, and then most of the people were being seen like more or less like serfs. And that's more or less held, and that they had the ability to do that. We had Phoenicia, we had Nebuchadnezzar, we had pharaohs, and then we had Rome ruling over a large Mediterranean ocean or lake. And everything, and they had emperors and so forth, and then they had 1,000 years of that, and then the serfs were more or less wallowing around in the mud, or doing what they're told, and authority, and all the authority institutions. Then we had the kings and queens of England, dynastic families. Political legitimacy was vested in the political legitimacy of the authority that's being asserted, whether it's it got down finally under Louis, and so the divine right of kings, and that's an absolutist thing. Don't tell me about some damn thing, democracy. It's where that. But it had that, and then it finally came over the United States, and we had the Industrial Revolution and all this stuff going on. We set up the United States of America, and we got a political system that is there. But you got all these things done. But one reigning thing is the ability. The political legitimacy is asserted and able to be really vouchsafed by weapons. They gave one advantage to a group, a tribe, over another, and they could, what they call, conquer.
Right.
Now, that can be subtle influence of intellectual this and that and everything, but essentially it's based up and called real politics,
right.
being reality.
Right.
Reality, who's got the gun,
right.
conquers.
Right.
That's it. And they conquer and make their system right and so forth. And is that not more or less the basis still of how the political legitimacy is vouchsafed, is whoever's got the biggest gun can rule? And we have a bigger gun now in the United States of America, or Britain had ruled the waves, or whatever, and that still holds in terms of what is backing up and creating what's called political legitimacy in reality terms. It's called realpolitics or realpolitik. Now, what about all of that, and how do we deal with that in terms of contemporary movement?
Well, first there's a concept. There's a concept that you have to insert, and it's the pecking order.
Right.
And, you know, this was first observed by Torstein, oh God, I can't remember his last name. No. Sheldrake Bebb. In roughly 1907, and he was a little kid. His parents had moved him out into the countryside in Denmark. And he got obsessive about watching the chickens. And he noticed that one chicken always went first in eating. Yeah. And then there was always another very specific chicken that went number 2.
It varies between various creatures that are that way. They have pecking orders.
He started taking notes.
Yeah,
and he started taking notes on how many times who pecked who.
Yeah.
And he noticed that the chicken that went first at the trough, at the feeding trough, never got pecked at all.
Right.
That the number 2 chicken only got pecked by the number 1 chicken.
Right.
That the number 2 chicken had a couple of other chickens that she got to peck.
Yeah.
And so on until you came down to the end where there was this poor featherless chicken that everybody pecked.
Well, that's part of that's one way in which social organization is that there are others. But
it's Thorleif Sheldrake.
Right.
And at any rate, so Sheldrake had just uncovered something extremely important. Why?
They could call it survival of the fittest too.
Well, but it's more specific. It is a social structure.
Yeah. Right. Okay.
And that social structure, you'll see lobsters going up against each other in showdowns for the number 1 position in a pecking order. You'll see lizards going up against each other again with similar head bobbing contests for position in a pecking order.
Fish swimming up this river, or the salmon.
Well, I don't know about fish because they have a different situation. Instead of showing that they're number 1 by defying the basic rule of nature, gravity, they have to defy buoyancy, and that's a whole different proposition.
Well, all right. Yeah, there are variations on it, and there are variations.
So, for example, a Thai fighting fish, instead of displaying its majesty by doing something that makes it rise and look big, it displays its majesty by taking a bunch of bubbles, hauling them down below the surface, and building a little bubble palace whose broadside is on the surface of the water and then goes down to a tip under the water.
Yeah, but these are examples from biology, and so why don't we get to some of the political
but the reason
realities.
that this is important is because right now there is a struggle going on in the Middle East. It's going on in Syria. It has been misrepresented to us, radically misrepresented to us. It's been represented as a pro-democratic, popular set of demonstrations that was violently put down by the government.
And we're able to assert that in the news agencies and put that out, and that's our propaganda, and that's the way it's done. And the real thing that backs all that up is the fact that we got Trident submarines. That's the point I'm trying to make.
But there's another, what's really going on there is a battle between not us, and Russia. It's a battle, although we've been involved, because our allies are fighting this one. And this is a war basically between Saudi Arabia and Iran.
They happen to be
Shia and Sunni.
Yeah, right.
And the Sunnis, the Saudis... It's
beginning to sound a lot like the news.
Well, the Saudis and the Egyptians 5 years ago were scared to death because they were being surrounded, they felt, by Iranian principalities. Iran had a whole set of proxy armies, including Hamas, in the Gaza Strip, Hezbollah in Lebanon, 2 proxy armies in Iraq, and 1 proxy army in Yemen. And the Saudis and the Egyptians felt encircled. And encirclement is considered so bad that it's a cause for war in international law.
Yeah, it is under, and they have that, and they have these things, 3-mile limit, all these things. But the point being...
But then the Arab Spring happened. Well, and when the Arab Spring happened, Saudi Arabia could no longer even count on Egypt. So the result is that the Saudis have felt that they need to weaken Iran. And they've chosen regime change in Syria. Why regime change in Syria? Because Syria is a very close ally. But of Iran.
That's good. That's getting into a detail of the political process in the news and so forth. What I was looking at more was a pattern.
Right.
And the pattern more or less...
But the pattern isn't just who has the biggest gun anymore wins.
You think it has not been over the long haul?
Oh, it has been. It has been since approximately 1500 when guns really came into play in a big way.
Well, I would submit it went longer before. It went back from the beginning of civilization, and it still continues as the principle of the political-minded people of the world, or the political scientists and so forth. They just call it being realistic as opposed to idealistic or something like that, and they will say they call it realpolitik.
But Osama bin Laden said he had defeated Russia. And he didn't have much in the way of guns compared to what Russia had, because modern guns don't cut it in what we call asymmetric war.
No, because that process is the larger pattern that's emerging is the ability of political legitimacy to be undergirded by military, and the military capability. This is the larger issue, it seems to me, in terms of we sit and talk in the year till 2013 that the weapon systems that have emerged in order for one power to be able to intimidate another, primarily with other things, diplomatic and so forth, and cultural and all of that, but the major thing is having the political power to dominate another, and they've reached the point where particularly, what's his name, to a group of us, he said the other day, Ramsey Clark, involved, that is written to the point where just the Trident submarines that exist, the theory of relativity, 1905, thermonuclear, hydrogen, you know, the hydrogen bomb, 54 and everything. The weapon systems have become now, at a certain point, this is, we talked earlier about 1970s, the weapon systems that exist and are on here, do exist, not just theories and inflection points, have become species lethal. That is, by the weapon systems that exist, if they were to be unleashed, as they have been, unlike all of human history, where we were protected in our impotence for that conservative carrying, as you said, that we're now at a point where we are able to stop, if the human species is the leading edge of conscious understanding in this universe as we understand it, we can stop consciousness through the unleashing of the weapon systems that exist, supposedly, historically, to differentiate who's got the power, who can win, and that kind of thing. Do you think that makes sense, or is that out of date?
It makes sense and is out of date simultaneously.
Okay.
It makes sense because we're still capable, with the United States having approximately 6,000 to 7,000 nuclear weapons and Russia about the same, we're still capable of wiping out the whole human race. But something else...
Wait a minute. You think that is the case? Now, when did we cross that?
Oh God,
can we agree that we were not able to do that as recently as the time when I was alive, and perhaps even yourself, the Second World War? We were not in any way able to, except to wipe out the other tribes.
It was not until roughly 1960 that that became possible.
No, to wipe out, as you say, the species.
Yeah.
Okay. That's an existential new reality.
But there's another new reality, because we've discussed this one on previous programs.
Have we? Well, it's a major one to me.
I know it's a very important point to you, but there's something else going on here that's important. And that is, since 2011, we've been at war in Afghanistan and Iraq. We've just recently stopped the war in Iraq within the last roughly year.
And they're supposed to come out by 14 in Afghanistan.
And those two wars have demonstrated something very, very important. They have demonstrated that the current form of armament we are using, the current form of military organization that we are using, is not enough to secure another country. It is not enough to dominate or conquer another country. Iraq is in the hands of the Iranians. Now, they tried to get Iraq by making war from 1981 to 1988 in their great war with Iraq.
Who did?
The Iranians.
You think the Iranians initiated that? I thought it would have been Hussein.
It
was a million people were killed.
A million people were killed.
Mr. Kissinger said, "Good, let them kill themselves."
Yeah, and $1 trillion went down the tubes.
Horrible.
And or something.
Yeah,
of
war
the sort.
war sucks.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, it really
but
does.
The point is, they weren't able to win using conventional or unconventional weapons because they were using unconventional weapons. They were using missiles. That's when they started using missiles.
No, it would take the arsenal of the United States of America being
But the
unleashed.
arsenal of the United States of America proved helpless to do it too.
Well,
we are now out of Iraq and we got nowhere.
What are we talking about?
We're talking about
that
that the current form of military organization and armament we are using is now proving to be incapable of doing what you outlined a few minutes ago, conquering territory. Or even having influence in territory.
Oh, you don't think the fact that we have overwhelming military capability, we have Trident submarines that have 110 nuclear-tipped things, and we have 4 fleets of those? You don't think that matters at all?
No.
Or that rule Britannia?
It would matter if we ever went to nuclear war.
No, not if we go to war. Yeah. It's the threat. It's the threat. It's the big stick. Oh, you think people don't care?
I know people don't care because it's been proven in Iraq. Iraq is totally independent of us.
Well, it wasn't. Who was it that went and invaded Iraq but us?
We did, and we lost.
We did it. Well, we haven't lost. I mean, okay. Okay.
We don't have control over the territory.
I'm trying to understand what you're saying. I think the larger issue is environmentally. No, not evolutionarily. And I want to get to the fact that we went to this conference the other day and this transhumanism. That we've reached a point existentially where that exists as a capability. We were protected. Up until that time, 200,000 years, we were protected against such a stupid thing as destroying our whole evolution. On the other side, we also may be getting to the point where through good design and through technological things and a window where through ephemeralization, doing more with less, good design, and Fuller and others did it. A friend of mine, Craven, the Cervantes said the only thing that exists in the world are 2 classes in the world amongst the citizens. They're haves and have-nots. Have we studied what it means to be a have? Have we studied what the technologically augmented capability of providing for everybody is in order for somebody to be a have? Have we studied the percentages of the world population can be seen to be haves in any kind of a realistic modeling of what our capability is on the side of providing for everybody?
Well, I've just been involved in this because, and this has nothing to do with armaments, I spent time with the 11th...
No, it's the opposite side.
Yeah, I spent time with the 11th President of India out in San Diego a few weeks ago. He and I have been negotiating together for the last 3 years.
On what?
I negotiated an arrangement. It's called the NSS Kalam Initiative, the National Space Society Kalam Initiative. His name is Dr. APJ Kalam. He is a missile or a rocket scientist. He is the rocket scientist responsible for the 2 rockets that have given India a space program. They've put up 60 of their own satellites, including Chandrayaan, which looped the loop of the moon for 9 months with sophisticated sensing equipment, and then splatted a probe down on the lunar surface. Go ahead. Okay, so he is voted one of the 2 most trusted men in India in a country that doesn't trust any of its politicians. He's a superstar in Asia.
Okay, good.
And he's obsessed with harvesting solar power in space and bringing it down to Earth. Now, why harvest solar power in space and transmit it down to Earth? Which is, by the way, something we've been doing since 1962. So we've been doing it for 51 years now. But because 600 million people in India do not have electrical power, and those 600 million people are have-nots in large part because they do not have electrical power. There are between 1.3 billion and 2 billion people who do not have electrical power.
It's horrible.
If we can harvest the solar power up there and transmit it down to Earth, we can bring those people
That would be one example of an extended capability that you're getting more and more. If you make it, Mr. Cervantes said there's 2 groups. Haves and have-nots. Do we consider ever, except a throwaway line, what it means to be a have? It's food, housing, shelter, education, understanding, about a sense of security, have.
Right.
And then on the other side, have-nots. Overwhelmingly throughout all of history, as best we can see, however you measure that, particularly if you measure it in terms of the capability of the present moment compared historically,
Right.
that it's been overwhelmingly a few haves compared to the vast majority of people since civilization who were like serfs who had to submit to the authority of those who had the club, whether it was the Vikings, whoever it was, and they did that. But now that on the positive side of the evolutionary process, we're getting to the point where the percentage of the world population that can realistically be seen to be haves has been growing exponentially.
Oh, yes.
It's going, and it crossed the 50% mark according to some very important modeling.
Right.
In 1970, the same year the weapons became species lethal,
Right.
as best modeling shows.
Right.
That's too existential. In a certain sense, that could be translated into the fact that this evolutionary process, including humanity, was transcending a condition of material scarcity
Right.
that had been the ontologic reality throughout all of that evolutionary period, and we were coming into a time of transcendent material scarcity that could be put up on the table along with all the gods and so forth as part of the political context in which we would set up institutional we would have an operating manual for spaceship
Well,
based upon an alternate reality.
We're rapidly,
and it never comes up in any of the intellectual thinking or the political thinking.
It does.
It does. You never see anybody say we've transcended scarcity. Everybody's starving.
Well, there are Peter Diamandis, who was one of the people at the conference.
Thank you.
That
He
you
was
went
at the
to,
conference. Let's talk.
Has a book called Abundance.
Yeah, it did.
And in my standard, there's this little digest that I give on what Western civilization has accomplished that it's never given credit for. Every civilization that pulls on our idealism claims that it's going to raise the poor and the oppressed. Every religious system tends to do that. Most philosophies tend to do that.
And they never have been able
they never have.
to. They haven't been able to. It wasn't technologically capable.
But as
it's like evolution is changing the capability.
Western civilization, which is what you're characterizing.
No,
as
not necessarily. I'm talking
evolution.
humanity. No, evolution. Evolution.
But you're talking about Western tools.
No,
that have done
not
this.
Western tools. Not Western.
Yeah.
It's not. No. I'm talking about the collective capability of an evolutionary process that involves these Homo sapiens and their ability. It includes the whole system.
That's being.
It's relating to everybody.
No.
No, that's what I'm saying. That there's a higher percentage of the world population
that's correct.
That over 50% and growing exponentially.
That's right.
We have enough for all within an ecological context for the human society to be organized without all of the power structures that have informed all of the claims to political
Let's go to the one claim, which is that the percentage of the have-nots has been shrinking.
No. One more point, a little nuance, right?
Okay.
It's not necessarily the reality.
Right.
The reality sucks.
It doesn't.
Well, okay, that's. But I'm sorry. Well, that's a big. No, it's not the reality.
Yeah.
It's the capability, and the capability was latent in the historical advance of time through evolution. It's a capability that's emerging in terms of our being able to provide for life support for the population of the world within an ecological context through good design and through thinking and intellectual thing, that the capability is coming, and it's coming exponentially. And this conference we were at the turn of the last week, was talking about transhumanism. We're coming to the end of the Homo sapien experience. We're coming to the end, the beginning of opening upon having a new relationship, species-like relationship in universe, perhaps through the evolutionary process, just as we went from Homo habilis to Homo sapien.
Let me show you a couple of things. First of all, I agree with you that we've gone only with one element. Let me tell you which element, and that is the element that we've gone from perhaps having 5% being haves and 95% being have-nots to 66% being haves and only 33%.
Are you talking in actual? You're trying to say in actual terms. You're trying to say that's in actual terms.
Actual terms.
Okay, I was thinking more in terms of the capability,
no,
like latent heat.
It's happened in reality.
Okay, well, send me the chapter and verse on that. You got modeling on that?
I can just give you some examples.
Okay, please.
In 1951, Egypt and South Korea were on a par. The people in South Korea were desperately poor. The people in Egypt were desperately poor.
Yeah.
By roughly 1990, the South Korean income had multiplied by 17 times. I mean the average citizen.
That's a lot. Yeah.
That means the average citizen of South Korea today lives like a middle-class American.
What percentage?
This is,
what
well, it was a factor of 17. This is almost everybody in South Korea.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Walk through any South Korean city, the number of desperately poor people you see will be almost zero.
Okay, marvelous, marvelous.
Yeah, and you'll see that in China. The rate of poverty has gone down, down, down. The size of the middle class has gone up, up, up. 7 or 8 years ago, India had already gotten to a point where 300 million of its people were middle class.
Back to Gaia. What about the collective whole of the Gaia human society? What do you think the figures are for the collective whole of Homo sapiens society?
I think that for
without going to specific examples, because there's always been rich nations and poor.
Out of 7 billion people,
we got about 7 billion now.
Yes, less than 2 billion are have-nots.
You would say that as a fact. Okay, I'd like to get chapter and verse. No, you're talking in actuality.
Yeah, I'm talking in actuality, not potential.
Do we? All right, that's interesting. How do you define a have? How do you define a have-not? Well, how do we do that? And where is the modeling that does that seriously? I don't see that kind of figures that in terms of the reality. How do you see it for how do you see it for a society that lets people go to sleep on the street? The underclass of the people around the world, even in the United States of America.
What percentage of the society? I don't like it when I pass a person who's sleeping on the street. Not at all, and especially not on a brutally cold day.
But we do it.
When it could kill. We don't do it.
They let them sleep. Why? We have the capability of providing a have-like status for everybody, and we don't do it. We have. What about all the stuff that? You think everything's hunky-dory?
No. Things are not hunky-dory.
Yeah, I thought you were trying to support Bradley Manning and that.
Yeah.
So I don't quite understand. If everything's so hunky-dory, don't you think we need?
No, I'm not saying it's hunky-dory.
The world calls for fundamental qualitative transformation of our institutional structure, does it not?
Nope.
Oh, you don't think so? Okay.
Let me give you the rest of the facts.
Let
me give you the few other facts that are important here.
Okay.
Chinese emperors would spend just about everything they had to gain an extra 4 or 5 years of life.
Yeah.
If you had been born in 1850 in London, your life expectancy would have been 39.85 years. If you'd been born in 2000 in London, it would have been 78.5 years. That's more than double the lifespan.
Right.
That's 40 extra years on a 38.5-inch life. That's 2 lifetimes for the price of 1.
That's about the same. My dad died and he was 48. That was the average age.
And I only met one grandparent because they'd all died.
That was the average age for an American male born in 1900 was 48. Now it's 78.
Here's another fact.
We've gained 30 years.
Well, if you'd been the poorest paid worker in London in 2000, you would have earned what an entire tenement full of the poorest paid workers in London had earned in 1850. Plus, there was a guy in London who was a techno freak. He loved technology. He loved it so much. He had this next technology building built, the Crystal Palace, and he had the next technology goods brought in from all over the world for him to see them.
Technology.
Right. Who was that? His name was Prince Edward. His wife was Queen Victoria.
Oh, yeah, right.
Prince Albert, sorry, Prince Albert. And at any rate, despite all of his wealth, he could not imagine, much less own, a cell phone or a laptop.
Yeah, there's progress being made in terms of the capability, and it's going exponential. Right. That's what this conference we went to. It was keynoted by Kurzweil.
Here's another fact.
It was keynoted by Kurzweil.
One more fact. And that is, well, actually 2 more facts. One is that if you took a Stanford Binet test from 1900, an old antique IQ test, and you gave it to a bunch of average kids today in the United States, they would test as marginal geniuses. They would test at roughly 135. That's right on the lip of genius.
All right. Well, you've got a lot of experiences there. I guess it would be something that to be worthy of talking, but I think we hover on the I don't think we have a leadership quality that is worthy of taking into account, in a Gaia sense, the whole of the human society and the ecology. And the ecology has to be done. And even more than that, a system that could not only be understood and gone along with to help the least advantaged people of all the world, like 100 trillion cells in an organism, they all matter. They can't be ignored and die in the street like they have been doing with regularity and within an ecological order. And then that would have to be the ultimate challenge. We'd have something that the people who are the so-called political leadership have some understanding of in terms of a new politics and new economics that is going to get past the fact that the technology is being displacing the mass of the people from the productive process through cybernetics and robotics. They don't have an economic system based upon, they have principles based upon an inherited system of insufficiency. They don't have one that can relate to the future, one of overabundant sufficiency for the mass of the people. And you've got the concentration of ownership and everything in the economic order in obscene proportions, and they don't have a vision. They would have to be included as well. And we don't have that kind of overarching understanding, an operating manual for spaceship Earth based on a qualitative transformation that would inform the political process. We don't have it. I'm very worried the leadership of the world doesn't have a political understanding that can include everybody in a way that's liberating rather than destructive. I would submit.
Okay, well,
I'm very worried about the lack of vision by our leadership or by the mass of the population.
Well, let me
and just drifting along won't do it.
Let me make a very strange statement.
Okay, this
incredible increase in IQ, this incredible increase in lifespan, this incredible increase in income and sheer capabilities. All these things have happened without conscious planning, without our coming up with a theory for how to achieve it. They have come, we don't know how we've produced these things.
Well, on the Science Channel where we saw that thing yesterday, that when we aired, everything is being done. It's not only cybernetics, and it's going exponential for crying out loud. Well, the capability is screaming. And we don't have a way of financing. We don't have a way of forming capital in a way that gets any ownership to the people. The people are being displaced like Lord Keynes said in terms of production. They don't have a way of distributing demand to clear the market of what can be done. We do not have a system that's worthy of what the future requires.
But you're talking about a conscious system, and I'm saying that our consciousness is still so puny that these astonishing things that we've achieved, material miracles, we do not know how we've achieved
But I'm worried about the lack of a future vision that can be something that can inspire the leadership of the country, including the mass who would be benefited by, to lead liberating all lives of concern with things that matter rather than being wage slaves to a system that wants them only to be conforming to a little pattern that doesn't give them any autonomy. We need a qualitative change. I think it's occupying the spirit of on a world scale. The people are rising. It's rise up time. It's Bastille time. There has to be a revolution in thinking, and that's my own sense of it. I don't think there's there's nothing says we're going to make it by just drifting in terms of all these outdated, reified institutions out of history.
Somehow, I feel that we have to come to understand how we've achieved the things we've achieved.
I think that's what we're about. That's what we're trying to be about. And if anybody wants to know about how things have come into being the way they are and how they ought to be addressed with all kinds of thinking, they all get to see this book. It's called The God Problem, How a Godless Cosmos Creates, by our author, Howard Bloom. Howard, so good to see you.
Harold.
You in the audience have had the pleasure of seeing a real intellectual giant here, that being Howard Bloom. Thank you for blooming. Thank you for watching Blooming Bloom. But and we'll be coming. Look, tune in tomorrow. We got another program with Michio Kaku talking on some of these issues. We're going to air tomorrow, Friday. That was done some years ago, addressing these issues that remain. Thanks for viewing. We'll be coming back again tomorrow. Thanks a lot.